So there are two court cases starting this week, one in Colorado, the other in Minnesota, both seeking to disqualify Trump from even running for president in 2024.
Former President Trump has a clear lead in the race for the Republican nomination, but is he qualified to run?
The legal argument to keep him out of the race invokes a rarely used provision in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Now, if we're going to wade through the how can they do this, we have to read the Constitution together, but I'll try to kind of translate it as we go and strike through the parts that we don't need to worry about. So, ta-da! There it is. But let's make this more digestible and relevant. So, follow me here. No person shall hold any office who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection. That last word, insurrection, being the key word here. So basically, one interpretation of this would suggest you can't be president if you took part in an insurrection.
Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was enacted right after the American Civil War in 1868. It was designed to punish those who had taken an oath and then violated that oath by fighting against the United States in the Civil War.
The more modern day version of all of that supposedly looks like this. Trump was impeached in the Democrat-controlled House for inciting insurrection, for mobilizing his supporters, whipping them up, paving the way for the lawlessness at the Capitol that we saw on January 6th. Trump is also accused of election subversion in two separate criminal cases. So again, the lawsuit being heard in Colorado right now alleges Trump engaged in insurrection and therefore should not be allowed to hold any office, including that of the President of the United States. And that means he shouldn't be allowed to run at all. For more than a month now, Donald Trump tried to have this case thrown out on all kinds of procedural grounds. But there were also some very novel arguments presented as well. One argument that Section 3 doesn't apply to Donald Trump because it only disqualifies people who took an oath to support the Constitution. But presidents take a different oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. So because Trump never promised to support the Constitution, he's immune to Section 3. And we should understand the framers of the Constitution to have made this distinction deliberately. That, this isn't some semantic nitpicking of words, they say. The framers wrote it this way, so that the president would be considered a separate case.
There are a lot of open questions about who are officers of the United States. It lists a number of officers, but not the president. Is the president covered?
But clearly, this particular motion to dismiss failed. The case wasn't thrown out, which means we will hear other arguments for why Trump should or shouldn't be allowed to run.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
There are two ways of interpreting Donald Trump's role during the riots of January 6th. Trump's critics would say he not only allowed it to happen, he instigated it. This was what the whole impeachment process was about. Be there, will be wild, is what he posted on Twitter. And according to evidence presented at the January 6th committee hearings, some of Trump's supporters interpreted this as a call to arms. But Trump's legal team argues this was no insurrection. Trump faced no criminal charges for those riots. He was acquitted by the Senate after his House impeachment. And he wasn't even at the Capitol when rioters broke in. So how could he have possibly engaged in insurrection? As for what he said to his followers that day, Trump says he was merely exercising his First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, to make the case that the election was stolen from him, even if it wasn't.
It's very similar to his defense in the criminal trials where he's charged with conspiring to overturn the election. And his lawyers say he didn't do anything illegal. He just, as president, voiced that he did believe the election results.
So on the one hand, Donald Trump uses the language like, let's go march peacefully. But on the other hand, he also uses words like fight. Again, uncertain questions, things that we don't have the answers for and that courts are going to have to address in the weeks ahead.
Another major argument against using the 14th Amendment to prevent Trump from running again is the question of whether the courts even have the authority to disqualify him. The last sentence of Section 3 gives one exception to the no insurrectionists allowed rule. Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So, yes, participating in an insurrection disqualifies a person from holding many higher offices. But if both the House and Senate agree with a 2/3 majority to give someone a pass, that's okay. So there are many who see that as a suggestion that Congress, not the courts, should be the ones affirming or denying Donald Trump.
It's very possible that Congress would want to evaluate the qualifications of presidential candidates on its own when it counts electoral votes on January 6th, 2025.
Because, for example, what if Donald Trump ran for president, won the election, and then Congress decided by a vote he's good, no matter what his role was on January 6th? Preemptively blocking him, his supporters say, would be premature. And besides, Trump supporters argue the 14th Amendment doesn't even explicitly bar insurrectionists from running for office, just from holding office. So shouldn't Trump be allowed to run, let the American people have their say, and then let Congress decide? So here's the thing. As with everything Donald Trump these days, this is unprecedented. The U.S. legal system hasn't had to deal with exactly this kind of case before, at least not since any of us have been alive. But the 14th Amendment has been invoked recently against lower-ranking candidates.
A judge ruled that Republican Otero County Commissioner Coy Griffin violated the 14th Amendment through his participation in the insurrection. He will not be able to hold any state or federal elected position in the future.
Last year, the 14th Amendment was successfully used to bar from office a New Mexico County Commissioner who entered the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. But when it was used against Marjorie Taylor Greene that same year, same basic idea, accusing her of engaging in an insurrection, which would disqualify her from holding office, that legal challenge failed.
A federal judge ruling that controversial Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is eligible to run for re-election.
Now, the circumstances, of course, were different in her case. She was among those lawmakers who evacuated the House, along with everyone else, when rioters stormed in. But there you go.
So I think a lot of uncertainty about which direction the Supreme Court might go. But again, we're in uncharted waters and we don't really know the answers to a lot of these questions, which is why they're so contested at the lower courts right now.
Either way, most experts seem to agree, no matter how these lower courts decide, at least one of these cases is very likely to be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. Literally dozens of lawsuits have been filed, aiming to accomplish more or less the same thing.
We've got a case in Colorado, we've got a case in Minnesota, there's another one in Michigan. All of them are having hearings over the next 2 weeks. And if not these 3 states, there are others that will probably have adjudications coming in the weeks ahead.
And so I think around the country, we're going to see this because every state has its own rules for putting candidates on the ballot. And so this could come up in each and every state. And obviously, President Trump seeks to be a candidate in all the states around the country. All you need is one of these initial lawsuits to make it to the U.S. Supreme Court to get a definite resolution of the issue.
Conservatives, some appointed by Trump himself, formed the majority on the Supreme Court bench. But some of the most prominent constitutional arguments seeking to prevent Trump from ever holding office again come from conservative voices. So the outcome of all of this, no one knows. But the 2024 election is coming fast.
If it's not resolved in a very short period of time, then his name is going to appear on the ballots in some places, but maybe not others, or his name is going to appear on the ballots and voters will have already cast votes for him, as other states might be considering disqualifying him.
So there is an immense pressure here for some kind of speedy resolution. 1 year until the next election. Time starts now.